If you really want to strive in the AI revolution, it is really important that you also master the fundamentals and understand the basics. So for this, it is really crucial that you also understand the terminology. So for this, I've included the most important words that you need to know and the most important concepts that you need to know to build on top of these essentially and be in the area of generative AI, which we are currently. But as you can see, there are a lot of other technological advancements which needed to happen so that essentially ChatGPT and other large language models and other generative AI models are possible. And we will start with the very basic ones with just the overall broad terminology AI. And then we will go deeper into machine learning, deep learning, generative AI. In deep learning, I actually also included neural networks, which is a very important concept, which you can go very deep in if you want. But it is also fine if you just have a high level overview of neural networks. Then I will talk about large language models. Then the term GPT, which means generative pre-trained transformers. Then GPT-4 is pretty self-explanatory. It's just the fourth version of GPT. And ChatGPT is also very understandable. Then I have also included the terminology process automation because this is then really important if you want to start to automate processes. And then the more advanced concept of intelligent process automation. But don't worry, these concepts are very simply explained, and I will just start out with artificial intelligence. And there are actually three different types out there, or there's actually also robotics, but I've just chosen the ones which are relevant for us. And the first one is just the general artificial intelligence, where computers actually try to imitate our behavior. So we try to simulate human intelligence. And the next one is machine learning, where we have a lot of different data, which will feed into an algorithm. And this algorithm learns from the data. And then we have deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning. And we will talk about this down here. So don't worry. And essentially it allows us to have a simulated version of our brain. So we simulate the behavior of our learning mechanisms within deep learning. And as mentioned before, so it is really just the way a machine learns from data and tries to imitate human intelligence. And examples for this are just problem solving, pattern recognition, and understanding natural language. And natural language understanding is called NLP. And this is the overall term for natural language processing, which we'll cover later. So you can see this whole ecosystem is quite interconnected. So it's great that you have a broad overview of the whole ecosystem. And I will also include more in-depth resources which you can check out so that you have a deeper understanding of this technology. So now let's talk about machine learning. And essentially, machine learning is just the algorithm we use to train these AI models. So it's the overall term for all of these technologies up here. So a substep of machine learning is deep learning, and then deep learning goes deeper with generative AI. Then it goes deeper into large language models. So this is really the foundational technology which allowed us to have these very advanced AI systems. And there are different types of machine learning, and I won't go into much detail to all of these, but there's unsupervised learning, there's supervised learning, and then there's reinforcement learning. And the unsupervised learning is essentially when the machine learns by itself. So it feeds itself the data. And supervised learning is when you have a human person who classifies the data, meaning let's say you want to train an image model. So you would have a human being classify images. So we have a picture of a cat, and the human person would classify this as a cat and feed this into the supervised learning algorithm. And then we have reinforcement learning, where you just essentially give the machine learning algorithm more and more data, which it can learn from itself. And you reinforce the learning process there. And if you can see these algorithms or these machine learning algorithms, even though you don't really 100% understand them yet, they're ever present with all the technologies and all the apps we use nowadays, with Netflix, which recommends you movies based on your search history, and Amazon, and also all our social media platforms are very sophisticated machine learning applications. So now let's talk about deep learning. And in comparison to machine learning, where you usually have a human being who actually extracts important information and then feeds it into an algorithm. This is a representation of an algorithm, and these points here are just states, and these are also called nodes. In deep learning, on the other hand, this feature extraction will be done by a machine. So we get even further down the line. So we have even more intelligent systems. And as I mentioned before, it's a subset of machine learning. And in deep learning, we have neural networks, which I will go into here. And it is essentially a great way how you can train unstructured data and a huge amount of unstructured data, where the algorithm or the deep learning algorithm is able to create outputs based on inputs. So it can essentially make predictions, it can make a sentiment analysis, it can make a lot of different things. And to understand deep learning a bit more, let's look at neural networks. So I advise you to check out the resource I've linked into the description, because this describes neural networks in much more detail. But essentially, it is just a very fundamental component of AI, and it mimics the human brain in the way we learn and in the way we process information. And it has different layers of nodes, and they're also called neurons. And every one of these nodes processes data. And you can imagine it like having a calculation between every one of these node connections. And the resource I've linked includes this information in more detail. And it's great for image and speech recognition and language translation and autonomous vehicles, which isn't that relevant for us in the AI automation agency space. But essentially, you get the point here. It is what allowed us to have this great technology such as ChatGPT is a huge evolution of different new technologies combined with each other. So let me close this off here, and let's cover large language models. So essentially what large language models are, it is a branch of generative AI, and it is built on top of neural networks, essentially. And the way it works is you feed it different sources of information, unstructured data or structured data, better said. But even today, you can feed it unstructured data and it will learn based on this text, audio files, 3D signals, and images. And this training data, first of all, the model will get first trained, and then later on, once it's trained, it can make information extraction, it can follow instruction, it can recognize objects, it can give caption to images, and even also generate images in the generative AI section of image generation. And of course, these are trained on a large amount of data, so it takes also a lot of compute to train these models. And as mentioned before, they can perform a lot of tasks like translation, question and answering, and content creation. So this is nothing new, but now you just have a deeper understanding of large language models. And what are behind these large language models is the technology generative pre-trained transformers, which is called GPT, better said. And we have the ChatGPT 4 version. So this is just a fourth version of the GPT. And essentially what it does, it gives these applications the ability to process language. And this language has been processed by inputting a lot of text data so that it essentially understands our human language, but also is able to generate this language. And as mentioned before, it is trained on a large neural network with hundreds and billions of parameters. So if you look at here, these would be the parameters here. So you can see this network is just immensely large. And ChatGPT, of course, is just the chatbot, which is powered by the GPT. Great. And now let's talk about process automation, because this would be the next step. So we can include actually AI in process automation, and this will be called intelligent process automation. But just to understand the basics of process automation, it is just the foundational concept of how you can automate processes, and it is the function how you automate repeating digital processes, and this can be executed with software. And we will talk about these software platforms such as Make.com and Zapier later on. And essentially what you do is you encode, or using no code, you also encode rules into the system that it can follow. And like this, it can perform predefined tasks. And in intelligent process automation, we bring this concept to a whole new level, where we include machine learning, artificial intelligence, cognitive learning, and robotics, which isn't that important for us, but it's also a part of intelligent process automation. So with this said, this is a high-level overview of the whole AI industry. And these are the most important words and terminology which you need to know to be able to really also understand what is going on under the hood of these GPTs, and in that sense also ChatGPT. I've linked resources which go much more into detail, and I highly advise you to check them out, because it will benefit you in your journey much, because for me, it was definitely a game changer once I actually understood what is going on with these technologies, and not just playing around with ChatGPT. So also, if you want to consult clients on this matter, it definitely makes sense that you have a foundational understanding of these technologies, essentially. LLMs such as ChatGPT are extremely powerful if you know how you can get the most out of them, and you do this by proper prompt engineering. And in this guide here, I will cover what prompt engineering is, why it matters, how you can essentially structure your prompts, and also more advanced prompting frameworks, which we will also look at together. So we will prompt together and see how the output changed based on our prompts. And generally speaking, what is prompt engineering? And it is nothing more than how you communicate with the AI chatbot so that you get the best output, essentially. And for this, you need to ask smart questions, which are as digestible for the AI as possible. And it is really important for anybody who wants to be an expert, essentially, in AI, because like this, you can definitely increase your productivity by at least 30% by just improving your prompting. The question is why it matters. As mentioned before, you get smarter, you get better outputs, and in that sense, work more efficient. But it is also very important if you design AI agents such as GPTs, because there you also need to write instructions for your GPTs, and this is essentially prompting. Then also for voice agents, you need to have proper prompts in place. And essentially, it helps the AI give you what you need and not something random, which it just has hallucinated out of its system. And let's talk about the basics of prompt engineering. And with this framework here, you're already better than 90% out of the people out there. Because if you follow these instructions here, you will craft prompts that the AI agent or the AI model is perfectly fine to process and give you a very good output. So the first one is give it clear instructions. Why do you want to have the output? So let's say give it the instruction that it is a marketing manager and you're creating a marketing campaign. And based on this, it will adjust itself and generate text that matches these instructions. Then again, context, which I've mentioned before, give you the background information why you're actually using this large language model, and yeah, your current situation in the company, for example, or the current market conditions and stuff like this can be very relevant for the large language model. Then input data, which you have, maybe you found an article about a good marketing strategy, just paste this in to give it more context and more relevant information for it to generate the proper marketing strategy for you. And then output indicator, how exactly do you want to have it outputted? You could say, I want to have it in the format of a blog post, or in the writing style of Dan Coe, for example, if you know him. He's a great writer, in my opinion. And then you can also adjust the temperature, and you can think of the temperature as the wildness of the AI, so how creative it is. And the higher the temperature, the more creative the AI responds. And from my knowing right now, I think 1 is the highest temperature, then it goes really crazy, and 0 is the lowest temperature, where it is really conservative and very factual, which can be very good in certain cases. So you need to understand your current situation to adjust the temperature. And yeah, if you want to do it for a creative task, you can really scale the temperature to 0.8. I would advise it in this area because 1 gets really crazy. And for factual information, for let's say a very factual blog post where you cover a technical concept, there you could use a lower temperature. Then zero-shot prompting. This is the first framework we are looking at, and it is essentially asking the AI to do something it hasn't been trained already. So you check out the capabilities of the AI and how it actually completes these tasks. And you could ask it, for example, to write a poem in a style it hasn't seen before, maybe a style which is very new, and you can see how it performs. Then one-shot prompting is when you give it a bit more context. So you give it an example of what you're looking for, and based on this example, it can already adjust itself to give you a better output. And there you could even do multiple shot prompting, and where you give it much more examples. Exactly. Then there's also the concept of prompt chaining, and it is leading the AI through a series of questions or tasks to build up a complex answer. And the question is, why should you even use such a prompting framework? And the great thing it does, it breaks down complicated problems into smaller and more manageable nuggets, which you can tackle better. And an example for this is asking an AI step-by-step a question how to solve a certain math problem. And the question is, how can I actually apply these prompting frameworks? And the way you can think about it, it's still not that clear because it's still quite new field, prompt engineering, but essentially experiment with them and try to find the best output and test the output multiple times, because the problem, or also a good thing, is that the AI generates always a new text, and this text can be one time good, but 10 times bad. So it would be just 1 out of 10 times good, or better said, 1 out of 11 times. And you really want to find a prompt which performs well for, let's say, 10 out of 11 times, essentially. And it is great to have these tools and frameworks at hand because they allow you to be more flexible in your prompting, and you are more creative with them in the sense that you will get much better outputs if you just do, for example, zero-shot prompting, which is the worst type of prompting you can essentially do. And there's a possibility that you can actually become a prompt engineer. So there are job posting out there, and it's like a mixture of having technical understanding of LLMs and AI, but also having crucial and good communication skills such as writing. And in my opinion, this field is still very great to go into. But the problem I observe is that AI agents will prompt themselves. So I believe this field might get obsolete. But still, as an AI automation engineer or as a service provider, as an AAA owner, it is really important that you understand the basics of prompt engineering. But with this, I think you already have the foundation you need to have. But now I would say, let's prompt together and see how these outputs differ from each other. So now let's get our hands dirty and start prompting a bit. And I've prepared a couple of prompts. And our goal today is actually to create a marketing strategy for LinkedIn for our company, essentially. And let's start with this prompt, which is very generic. This is something that somebody could ask potentially on Google, for example. How do companies use LinkedIn for marketing? And as you can see, it is a very, very generic advice coming out from ChatGPT, which is quite understandable. Okay, I'm not sure if we actually need to read all of this because it is actually a very bad output for our goal. So let's just create a new page and let's make another example where we want to have LinkedIn marketing strategy and we are a tech company. So this isn't very specific, but it is definitely more context. So as you can see, we're giving here more context and we're already getting more actionable advice. So set up a company page or optimize it better and create and share valuable content. LinkedIn ads is something that is mentioned here. And let's look. Okay. Interesting. As you can see, the input is getting better, but still it's not that what we want. We want to have a marketing strategy. And for this, let me put in another prompt where I ask it to create a LinkedIn strategy. And we're a B2B focused company. And let's check it out, what it generates. And it should also include the content type and posting frequency. So we're getting much more specific. We're giving it more data. And again, it is already giving a similar output, but it's already a bit better. As we can see, content strategy, product demos and webinars. Okay. Posting frequency. It recommends us 3 to 4 times per week. That's interesting. Similar content, as you can see, but a bit more in depth. So let's see what happens if we actually put in a better prompt where we say that we're a mid-sized tech company specializing in cybersecurity, for example, and we are targeting IT professionals. And now we're specifying our ideal customer and our ideal customer avatar, essentially. Let's see what it generates now. Mm-hmm. So these steps are pretty similar, but it gets much, much, much more specific. Mm-hmm. Right. And based on this, we could reprompt it. So this is really where the magic happens with prompt engineering, is where we actually reprompt it again, because now we have the possibility to say, create a post based on this strategy about, what was the company about? Let me check. Cybersecurity. Use the temperature 0.8. So that's really creative. Let's see how the output will be. Okay. I think we have seen enough. Let me write another prompt and where I ask it, make it shorter and use the temperature 0.2. And let's see if it is much more conservative. Now it has definitely made it much shorter. And the real magic happens for prompt engineering once we actually go into the GPTs, because if we create a GPT, the main or the core thing about GPTs are their instructions. And for this, we need proper prompt engineering. So again, the whole framework would be most likely having instructions, then having context, relevant data, and the output format. And this is, in my opinion, where prompt engineering goes, because it is now multiple shot prompting, and especially with AI agents, they will actually prompt itself. So the first prompt really needs to be well designed. But at some point, I believe prompt engineering will be replaced by AI because these systems are capable of generating very good text, and in that sense also very good prompts. So still, it is important that you master the fundamentals and foundations to move ahead to AI automations. But slowly you're getting ready because you have learned the AI terminology until now, and also prompt engineering. But in the next section, I will talk about automations essentially with Make.com and Zapier. So stay tuned for this. So before we get started with building automations on Zapier and Make, it is really important that we understand APIs. So APIs are really the foundation of these platforms, where we essentially connect apps with each other. And to give you a brief overview of what an API is, essentially here you can see we have the user, which would be in our case us. So we, the users, make a request to a server, but better said, this here could be, for example, Google Sheets. So we want to make a request to Google Sheets and ask Google Sheets, hey, could we have a row and this item of this column? And this is request we send. And the API is the middleman, which transfers this message to Google Sheets. So there needs to be somebody who tells Google Sheets, hey, we want to have this item of the row in this column, essentially. And then usually Google Sheets gives us a response if the item is there. And to make it even more simple, it's like in a restaurant where you have customers and you have a waiter and you have a chef. And you can imagine it like this. We order food to the waiter, and the waiter, of course, tells this to the chef, and the chef prepares the food. And as soon as it's done, it will bring it to the waiter, and the waiter will bring it to us, the customers. And this is actually a very simple representation of how APIs work. But of course, APIs are not that simple, because you need to write a bit of code. But I will show you a hack which will be very useful, which is just using ChatGPT to help you write the code or view the documentation. Or even better, you don't need to write code with Zapier and Make.com in most cases, because they've already simplified this problem for you. And that's really the power of Make.com and Zapier and all these no-code builders. They allow you to connect these apps with each other without writing a single line of code. Exactly. And yeah, you will send data and you will get data, and there are different kind of requests you can send to an API. The question is, why are they so important? Because we want to build out automations. We want to connect our apps with each other so that they can communicate, send data, post data. And this only works if we have APIs in place. And luckily, with almost every modern app nowadays, they have an API where you can connect to. And of course, this makes tasks much more efficient, and it just allows us to integrate services with each other. That makes perfectly sense. And as mentioned before, Zapier and Makes allows you to build out these automations in a very simple way. And yeah, in that sense, build out automations. And this could be a very simple automation you can build out. So as soon as as soon as you receive an email in your inbox, you will automatically save the attachment into a Google Drive, for example, and you will log the details into Google Sheets. So the trigger would be, once you have an email, save this data to, oh, what an interesting emoji here. But once you have an email received, send the data to the Google Drive, store it there, and save the changes into a Google Sheets. The same for social media management. There are a lot of marketing automations out there to share a new blog post automatically on Instagram, for example, where you just link it, or better said, LinkedIn would be more suitable. Then a sales alert. So just send a Slack message whenever you receive a new order on Shopify, for example, or on Stripe. And the easiest way to get started with automation is something I will cover in the next section. But essentially, just choose a very simple task. Start small and you can build from there and you can expand. But choose a task that is quite simple. And I will give you actually tasks in this course. So don't worry. You don't need to come up with them. So I will have real world use cases which you can apply. Yeah, overall, APIs are the way how you automate tasks, and you can use Zapier and make.com to build out these automations without code. But it is still very important that you have some kind of understanding what an API is. And we will actually have a quick look at the API documentation of OpenAI. So stay tuned for this. So now I'm here in the OpenAI API documentation. And before we start this, I want to mention it is completely fine if you don't understand everything what I talk right now. And because make.com and Zapier will make this process so simple, where you just have a visual interface to build out essentially API connections without any code. So you don't need to understand the code, but it's, I think, just very important that you also understand where is this all coming from and what is happening under the hood. And here, the different APIs from OpenAI. So as you can see, you can really do different kind of things here. And the most popular one is probably text generation, where you have the ChatGPT interface, more or less, where you can chat with OpenAI essentially, and with GPT-4. And as you can see, this is how the documentation looks like. So you would need to have the endpoint defined in the API call. And this is the code for it. So again, don't worry, don't feel overwhelmed if you don't understand it. But essentially what you do is you just define the content type, ignore this, define this. This is something that is very important. This is your OpenAI API key. And in order to call APIs, you usually need to have a key. And the key is essentially the way how you verify yourself to OpenAI, so that OpenAI knows you're not just a random person who calls their service, but you actually are eligible to call their service, because most likely you're paying, because for this OpenAI API key, you need to leave your credit card. But I have to say it's very, very cheap. So don't worry, it costs a couple of cents or a couple of dollars per month if you use it a lot. And then you define the model. And in this case, they took GPT 3.5 Turbo. And then now it's actually time to include the messages. And in the beginning, you just specify its role. So you say you're just a system and you are helpful. And then it's already about the chat, where the user, so you can see here the role user, sends the message and asks who won the World Series in 2020. And the assistant will answer. So this is something it has responded. The Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series in 2020. And then the next question comes. So similar to ChatGPT. So now you see how it looks like under the hood. It looks more cryptic and a bit less intuitive. But essentially, this is how this all works. And this is the format. I think this is not too important for you. But now let's have a look at another API. Let's look at image generation, for example. And as you can see, it is now much more simpler, where you just have to prompt, you specify the model, and you specify the size you want to have. And exactly, this is how it looks like. But you will see in Make.com and in Zapier, it will be so simple. You won't need to worry about code or anything. And the last thing I want to show you is the Assistants API, because this is, in my opinion, the most important part of OpenAI and the heart piece, because it allows you to build out assistants and take these assistants to other applications. Because if you already have played around with GPT, you realize you're locked into the OpenAI ecosystem, and you can't take this GPT to an app, for example. So it is very hard to build the applications for a client, for example, because it's in the OpenAI ecosystem. So this is a way how you can bring your GPTs away and build out a landing page for it, for example. And here you can see it is create your own assistant, and you do this by having like a similar process, content type application /JSON. Again, your OpenAI API key, and then you give it the instructions, and you know the instruction tab in the GPT section. So it is very similar. And again, you have the name, which is also same. And then you even give it the tools. So it has code interpreter, it has also web browsing, I think, and then the model GPT-4. And then what you need to do is you need to create a thread. So that's essentially another type of API call you make, where you store the informations of the messages that come in and go out, essentially. And this is add a message to thread. And that's what I mentioned. So there's these two important categories. So first you need to create assistant, and then you need to create a thread for the assistant. And then you need to add a message to the thread. And run is essentially when you send the message to the assistant. This is creating a run. And then you also need to have a way how you can retrieve the output. So this is something I will cover in more detail. So don't worry if you didn't really understand it yet. I hope I didn't confuse you with this. So also just stay calm. Everything is fine. You will understanding over time. Like wrapping your head around these concepts sometimes takes a bit time. So it is completely normal if you potentially feel overwhelmed. I got many people asking me which platform they should choose to learn. Is it Zapier or Make? And my answer to this is actually learn both if you have the time, but maybe start out with Zapier because it is easier to get started. And honestly, they have such a great AI ecosystem where you can build out AI agents or AI agents like bots. And they have over 7,000 integrations. That's much more than Make has. But they have also a pretty expensive pricing plan, and it isn't that customizable in comparison to Make.com. And the visual builder isn't that good. So it gets really complicated if you want to build out complex automations with different paths. Even though they've now included the visual builder, it's still not the best in my opinion. So for beginners, definitely go with Zapier. They have also a free plan where you can already build out a couple of automations. So check this out. But if you're more intermediate, I would advise you to go with Make.com because it is cheaper, and especially if you work with clients who have automations which run often and a lot of automations, it gets really expensive. So I highly recommend to go with Make.com, and you can really customize this platform because it has much more capabilities than Zapier. It is more scalable, and the visual builder is just great. But the problem is the AI ecosystem isn't that good. So if you have like an AI heavy application or automation, maybe Zapier might be the better choice if you want to build out agents. But if you want to build out just AI automations where you just connect OpenAI with Google Forms, for example, then Make.com is still better. But it has a bit steeper learning curve, but in my opinion, also a better learning platform, the Make.com Academy. But generally speaking, learn both. I've included them both in the course. And essentially, it is really important that you learn the skill of automation to strive essentially in this AI revolution, because only then you can build out AI automations. And as mentioned before, they're like the glue of the internet. They connect all your apps with each other using the API. So if you skip the API part, it's probably good if you check it out really quickly. And then you can also connect AI models, because these AI models also have APIs, not just OpenAI, Claude, 11 Labs, DALI. All these applications have APIs, so you can really create stunning images and texts with these APIs. And here are a couple of use cases which you can use automation for marketing, sales, operations, customer experience, finance, IT, HR in that sense, just called people here, and just overall productivity. And the question is, how can you get started as fast as possible and also as simple as possible? And you first need to understand, this is out of place here, but it is not just about automation skill. It is also about identifying the right use case. And I will help you identify the right use case in a later module. And then the overall system that is in place. So it is different skills you need to master to be able to really build out great automations and have a high output. But for now, we just focus on the automation skills. And you usually always start out with a flowchart. A flowchart is exactly this, what I have here. So essentially, you script out the automation you want to build. So this is actually, I actually deleted it, sadly. But you can actually build out an automation, or you can script out the automation using a flowchart. So it would look something like this. Let's delete this really quickly. This is too small. Where you have the trigger, let's say new email, and then what happens next is the action. We've mentioned this example already, store document in Google Drive if there is a document. So what we have here, we have a smaller section which is actually a filter. Let's make this much smaller. And here is the filter, where I filter if there is an attachment in the email. If yes, we will store this in the Google document, and this would already be an automation. So as you can see, I've scripted this out so that I have understanding of how this automation will look like, and before actually building it out, it just makes things more easy. And then you build out the smallest product you can, called minimum viable product, just that you have a proof of concept that you know, okay, I can deliver this and it will work essentially. And then you just test and iterate and really build it out bigger and bigger. With this said, I would say let's start building and let's try out these platforms. Now, finally, let's start building in Make.com. And for this, I've set up a completely free account so that you can follow along with everything that I do without paying anything. But at some point, I definitely recommend you to subscribe to the advanced plan or intermediate plan. I'm not sure how it is called. It is, I think, around $12, and you get 10,000 operations instead of 1,000 operations and a couple of other benefits. And so that you understand what operations are essentially how often your automation runs. And you will see it in more detail later on. And here you could potentially invite team members. And here are the scenarios which you have here. Then here you can find templates, which are really interesting in my opinion, because Let's search for AI templates here, and as you can see, there are already a lot of ones out there where you can start to use them. For example, here, sentiment analysis of a Twitter tweet, or better said, X now. And here are the connections which you have. This looks like this. These are just the connections I have on my free account, where I've connected all these apps, and it makes it much faster if you build them out, because like this, you can essentially just get started building without reconnecting to these apps, but you will see how this looks like. Then here are webhooks. Don't worry if you don't understand them yet. We'll check them out. And then here are the keys, which isn't that important. But I would say let's directly hop into the scenario editor, and let's start to build out our first scenario. And as you can see here, this is the visual builder where you can include an app. Let's say they actually changed the interface. So I've seen this the first time now, but it will be most likely the same. So let's say you have a new row in a Google Sheets. This will be the trigger. And then you can, of course, connect these to other apps. Let's say OpenAI could be an example, where you say create a completion. And first, before we really build out the scenario, I want you to go through a couple of things first. So let me put this up here. So what we have here is we can run the scenario, but as you can see, this won't work because nothing is connected yet. But let's say I connect the Google Sheets here. I would need to check if I have one which makes sense. I will set one up later before I want to give you a guide through this whole ecosystem here. Essentially, what you can do here is you can schedule these scenarios, and as you can see, these are modules. And I've mentioned operations before. So if I run this will cost me 2 operations per run, and you can imagine this. This is how often it runs, and I can schedule this for every 15 minutes. But I can also go up to certain days of the week, days of the month, once or at regular intervals. Let's say you can even go down to, or the minimum is 15 minutes, but let's say every 60 minutes, for example, you could schedule this scenario. And here is where you turn it on. This is when the scenario is really up and running, and essentially starts running. And here the settings, these are in most cases not that important for you yet in the beginning, but just know that you have here the settings if you would need to adjust something. Then here you can include notes right here where you explain the scenario. Exactly. Then here you can auto align. This makes sense if you have a more complex scenario, which is much bigger. So if we add here another module, let's say Airtable, for example, create record. And if we say auto align, it will just align it. So it is sometimes useful if you have scenarios which are quite widespread. And here you can essentially export the blueprint or import a blueprint. And this is actually very convenient if you have already automations which are pre-built, you can use them. But this is actually most of the things that you need to know about make.com. And now I would prepare Google Sheets so that we can build something out so that we can essentially have our first automation. So as mentioned before already, the best way to start an automation is usually with a flowchart so that we have a better understanding of what we're actually building. And so that you also have a bit of understanding what I'm planning to do. Let me just give it a title really quickly here. And what we want to do is we want to have AI news aggregated, essentially. created. Let's make it a bit bigger. Good. And the way we start out is we have news sources. So this could be blogs, this could be emails, meaning newsletters, or this could also be social media posts. And today we will specifically focus on blogs. So the problem with staying ahead in AI is that you need to have a lot of different resources and be always online, essentially, which can be a quite time consuming task. And it isn't the best one for focus, definitely. So there must be a better way how we can solve this problem, and we can solve this with automation, essentially. And the way I would build this out is, so once we have these sources, let's maybe start with a blog. So we have a good AI blog. And then what we want to do is we want to filter this information. Filter. And then in the next step, we want to include it into a database, or this could be a Google Sheets. This could be Airtable. Airtable is the one we will choose today because it has a much better functionality than Google Sheets. You can display it in different kind of perspectives, essentially. So you will see what I mean with this. And we will connect these with each other. And to translate this into make.com terms, so once we want to fetch data from a blog, so we will choose the blog AI Business because it gives quite decent news. And then what we want to do is we want to get this data as soon as a new blog post gets posted on there. We want to get this data. So what we do is we want to watch RSS feed. And then how do we filter this? And we can actually filter this with AI. So we will use ChatGPT as a model. And then in the last step, we store it in Airtable. And we could even go further, that we say, if you're a content creator and you also want to create content, you could take this Airtable database and say, this could be a next automation as soon as the Airtable stage has changed. Stage has changed. We could essentially generate Twitter posts, for example, or X posts now. And this will be done with ChatGPT. So as you can see, this is the way how you could potentially script out this automation. And let's start out with getting the data from the blog. And yeah, we see each other in Make. So now we're here in make.com and we start our scenario with an RSS feed where we watch items, and this is the trigger. And now we would need to pass in the URL. But here is the problem. Might be the wrong one. Here's the problem. If I just pass in this URL here, it won't work. So if we try to run this scenario, we put this here, it won't happen because it is not a feed. So this URL is not right. So what we need to do is we need to go to this blog here and we need to test it out, which is the RSS feed. And for this, there are tools out there, but the most common ways how you can check this out is by checking feed. If this happens, it didn't work. So if code pops up, it is a good sign. Let's check. RSS is also one. Page not found. Then XML is one. As you can see, it didn't work. And now what we want to try is rss.xml. This is also one, and this is the code which we need. And for this, we can now copy this here, head back to make.com and try it out by pasting the URL in here. And let's put 4 values, which it will return for us. Now let's run it, and boom, it has worked. Lovely. And as you can see, here we have 2 bundles. And what we have there is the title, a description, a summary, the URL, and other sources like an image. And now the next step is to filter these, because there are a lot of news and a lot of AI news which are quite irrelevant in my opinion. So there needs to be a way how we can filter if the news is actually is interesting and if it can provide value for us. For this, we will use ChatGPT. And what we want to do is create a completion. And from here, let me put this up here. For this, GPT 3.5 would also be sufficient, but I will use GPT 4. And what we want to do is add a message, let's say system. And I've already prepared this automation. I have it in use for myself. So I just copied this prompt here really quickly. Okay, so that you can also see it. So essentially, the responsibility of ChatGPT is to check if this article matches the criteria below, and these are the criteria. It should have at least one category of these. So either it should be a big tech company with huge news, or about AI agents, which is something I specialize in currently. And it shouldn't be too industry specific. So if they're going deep down into medical tech, I'm not really interested into it. And then here, let me exclude this. What we want to do is we want to include the title of the article and the summary, which we have here. So also, let me do it for you. Here you can put in the summary. And the way it filters is if it matches with one of these criteria, output yes. And I have also said do not include any pretext or quotation marks. And then if not, then use no. And let's maybe increase the tokens to 500 just to be safe. Now let's run this automation once and let's see what happens. Oops. First, let me save it really quickly. And now let's choose where to start. Let's select an RSS feed. Let's check this one. And what happens is we have the input, which is here. The message which has been sent in was this one, as you can see, the prompt. And now it has included the title because this was a placeholder. And then here, text. And what was the output? We can find this here under choices, one, message, and yes. Okay, so this would be a great article, an interesting one. So let's store this into an Airtable database. And we do this by, that's weird. Here you go. Create a record. But we don't just want to create any record. Let me pull this down here. It's weird. So I need to reconnect maybe. Exactly, now I have here the database of news. So I've already created this. So let me get into Airtable really quickly. Here into news, and as you can see, it's already filled with quite some articles because I'm using this automation already. But that you see the structure, it works like this. It has a title, it has a summary, then it has the URL, and it has a thumbnail if it has a picture. Okay, so let me go back to make.com. So in order for this to work, you would need to set up your Airtable database exactly like this. Or if you understand make.com, you can do it in your own way, in a way that essentially works for you. So as we can see, we choose the Airtable database news. We choose the table, table 1. And now what we want to do is we want to include the title where the title is. We want to have a summary where the summary is. Put in the URL where the URL is. Sorry, this is the URL of the image. Status is not too important. Now, here we have the thumbnail, and here is where we take the URL, and the file name is exactly here, image name. Great. And what we want to include now here is we want to include a filter, set up a filter, because we don't want to include every data here. So let's say if yes, let's call this filter if yes. So if the result of ChatGPT, here message content equal to yes, then continue. If not, don't continue. So let's test out this automation, and let's choose where we want to start. Great. Which one could be interesting? Google. This does fulfill one of our criteria of a big tech company. Great, it went through. Okay, let's see what happens. So what happened here? It ran through a couple of operations actually. It's interesting. And it has completed quite a few. So we have the input, summary, new tools allow workspace to return, the thumbnail URL. And if we go into the Airtable database gallery, we can see it down here. We have the Google, Bill, unleashing the power of generative AI for tabular AI series. So as you can see, the Airtable database got filled out. So this is a way how we could build out this automation. Like always, before we start building, it is important that we have a little bit of theory, and so that you understand the fundamentals in a bit more detail. So the goal of chatbots are essentially leveraging AI and making them even smarter by giving it data from yourself or from your company, and also allowing it to do actions in your behalf. So this would already go into the direction of AI agents. But at the core of chatbots is the technology RAG, meaning retrieval augmented generation. And the way this works is we have the user. So in that case, the person who interacts with the chatbot, and he sends a request, or better said, a question. And what the chatbot does, it goes into the database, and in this case, it will be a vector database, which I will cover down here, and it will search for relevant information. So let's say I have a question of how is our sales process structured. So this data or this question will get asked into the chatbot, and the chatbot will search for sales process in the database. And once it has found this, it will essentially send this data to the chatbot, and the chatbot will send this to the LLM with the request from the user. And the LLM will generate an answer based on the information found in the database, plus the prompts and instructions it has, and also the training data it has already been trained on, like ChatGPT, for example. The LLM could be ChatGPT here. And this answer will be sent to the user. So as you can see, this flow works like this. User asks a question, the chatbot searches for relevant information in the database. The relevant information will be sent to ChatGPT, for example. ChatGPT generates an answer based on the relevant information and its instructions, and this will be sent to the user again. And there's also the possibilities where you have also other plugins. For example, you could plug your sales CRM into it. So it could also search for information in your sales CRM, for example. And this, at the end, will get stored into the storage. So the answer that has been generated will be stored into the storage, like memory. So I hope this was quite understandable. But if not, there are a lot of resources where you can dive much deeper into RAG. It is really the core foundation of chatbots, essentially. But the great thing about chatbots builders like down here, like Voiceflow, for example, they have this already integrated. So you don't need to understand this complex stuff. It is just for you to have a more deeper understanding what is happening under the hood. And as mentioned before, it requires a lot of training data. And yeah, at the end, you need to iterate. Then where is this data stored? Essentially, it is not stored in a regular database, but it is stored in a vector database. And the way this works, so you have a lot of text data, and this will be essentially stored into vectors. And vectors from mathematics, if you remember, there are these x, y, or x, y, and z axes. So it is in a three-dimensional space. The question is, why is it stored in a three-dimensional space? So that you can order different information which are closer to each other. So example would be here. Cats are very similar to dogs. So they are in the vector database much closer to each other than, for example, I think this is robots. Yeah, I think robots. So as you can see in this vector database, everything which are cats will be stored in a similar area, so that once you send a query for a cat, you can return these values here because they're very close to each other. On the other hand, let's say a machine would be here, or a machine would be here nearer to robots, but much further away from cats and dogs. So as you can see, when we feed in text data, this will be processed and indexed using a location. And text inputs with similar meaning and similar context will be stored closer to each other. So as soon as I make a request for a certain area, the database can look for the surrounding areas if there's also relevant information in there. And this makes it a great way for chatbots to have more understanding and in that sense give better output to the chatbot. So this is essentially a search function. And it is very scalable. It is much faster. So it's optimized for speed essentially and accuracy. Because if you would have a regular database, for example, if I would ask a question about let's say I ask a question about a lion, and if there's no lion in the database, or better said, jaguar, let's make a jaguar. If there's no jaguar in the database, it will return nothing. But if there's cats in there, you could make the connection to jaguar are in the family of cats. So it could at least generate some kind of relevant information. But of course, it's important that it doesn't generate misinformation. But you get the point here. And then once you understand these concepts, it's also important that you build out a good chat flow. What is a chat flow? It's essentially how you guide the user through the chatbot. And this involves planning, and you usually do this with a flowchart. So I can recommend Figma or Miro for this. And you want to essentially understand where you want to lead your user to. And also you need to have a fallback strategy. So essentially once the chatbot doesn't know an answer, it should be able to tell the user it doesn't have an answer. Here's a place where you can find more information or contact a real person. And now let's talk about chatbot building platforms. There are a lot of ones out there, and I'm sure they will most likely change even in 2 weeks after recording this video. But at this time, these are chatbot platforms which are quite decent. So the first one is Voiceflow. I use this personally the most because I think it's a great platform, but an alternative is BotPress. Then you have OpenAI, even though I can't really say this is a chatbot building platform, but you can definitely build out GPTs, and using the Assistant API, you can bring these chatbots out of the platform. But the problem is you don't have control over the conversation. You can't create a chat flow. You can just prompt the LLM essentially. Then here we have Pinecone, which is a vector database. So if you have a lot of data, you would use Pinecone. But the great thing with Voiceflow and BotPress, they have already integrated vector databases essentially. But at some point you get limited, then you would need to use Pinecone. And then we have LangChain and Flowwise. Don't get confused. Flowwise is actually the exact same thing like LangChain, but it's just a no-code builder of Flowwise. So, Flowwise is the no-code builder of LangChain. So LangChain is a framework for you to use build out AI applications very fast, using different LLMs, not just ChatGPT, but also Claude, like Llama and Mistral. And Flowwise really simplifies this process. So this is really the fundamentals of chatbot building, which I think is important. You can dive into these themes in much more detail. But my recommendation to you would be follow the next video, which is actually about Voiceflow. Then you will learn a lot about chatbot building. So now I'm here in Voiceflow and let's finally build our first chatbot. And before we do this, I want to give you a brief guide about the platform. Here you have a workspace. So let's say you work with a client, you would invite them. And for today's video, I created a free account that you can follow along with all the features that are available for the free account. And here you can essentially learn. They have a lot of great resources out there. So I believe this tutorial won't be enough to cover everything. But honestly, they did a very good job with documenting how the platform works. So you can definitely find more resources there. But today we will want to get our hands dirty and build out a lead generation chatbot. Here we have templates. Templates built by the community or built by Voiceflow itself. But if we head back to the platform here, they have also an update tab where you can see what's new in Voiceflow, and also a Discord community where you get much support if you have problems with building out the chatbot. So with this said, I would say let's create a new assistant so that I can give you a guide. Let's say test assistant. And here we can choose the modality. So do we want to chat with it via text or do we want to chat with it via voice? And today we will do it with chat. Let's choose English as the language. Let's just create an assistant. Great. So here they give you a brief guide, but honestly, I would just directly delete everything of this because this might confuse you. So here, as you can see, we have this start button. So here is where the workflow actually starts. And if I pull this here, what happens is I can choose, do I want to use an AI to respond to a question? Do I want to say something with text, an image, or a card or carousel? I will just show you what a card is. Essentially, it is an area where you can upload images. Let me just upload something so that you have an idea. Let's say test. That should be sufficient. And let's, or before I show you too fast, here is where you actually can test the chatbot. Here you obviously publish it. And let's just test the prototype and let's see what happens. It spits out this card here, okay? But this isn't what we want to do. So here is the card option, and the carousel option is just where you can stack multiple cards next to each other where you can scroll through them. In our example, I will share it with you. So we will build this out together. So don't feel overwhelmed. It takes a bit of time to get used to the platform if you haven't built on Voiceflow yet. Then we have the listen options where we actually look for an answer of the user. So this could look like this. So let me just put in here a text block where we actually want to ask a question. So let's ask, how are you? This would be our question. And then we want to actually listen to the response of the user. And we do this by using the capture card. What this does is it captures the reply of the user of how are you? and we want to capture obviously the entire reply. And then it is important that we store this reply in a variable so that we can maybe use this information for another time in the chat flow, essentially. So I hope you're aware or are familiar with the concept of variables. It is essentially a placeholder for a value, so you can store information in this. And let's call it, let's say, user emotional state. Let's call it like this. We store this in the variable. And let me connect this here. And let's try it out. Or let's go even a step further before we test it out. And let's have the AI respond to it. So we have here the AI card and we say respond to it. And let's say we use the AI model and it will say, first of all, what we need to do is we need to include the variable, which we have here. So what we do is we include the answer of the user in the prompt, and we want to say, let's call it here user reply, answer this in a friendly way. I hope this will be sufficient enough. Let's try it out. But before we test it, we need to connect this here to this block here. Okay, let's try it out. So it has spit out, how are you? I'm fine. Let's see if it answers. How about you? That's great to hear. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Anything exciting happening in your day so far? So that's really incredible how this is already working out for us, even though we did literally nothing or just a little. So as you can see, we have here the listen blocks, and then we have here logic. So conditionals. So if this happens, then we want to do this. Then set, this is like setting variables. So example, if we have an answer here, we want to store this into a variable, for example. Then we have random. Honestly, I'm not that sure. Right. It explains this here. So it randomizes the conversation path at this point, or in the conversation. This isn't that important. So I barely use this, to be honest. Then we have components, which you can also build out here in the content. Components are here. Then we also have the end of the conversation. So we could just include this here, and this would be the end of the conversation where the chatbot would finish. But most likely we want to expand this use case. And then here at dev, we have different tools which we as developers can use. For example, calling, let me put this here. It is better like this, calling a function. And this one is the most important one, calling an API. So we will use this to connect this with Make, and with Make we can connect to literally any app on the internet if they have an API. So this is extremely powerful to use these API calls to make your chatbot even more powerful. And functions are where you encode certain tasks that the AI agents can do. And we can also do this here in the functions tab, where we create a function. And we have certain templates here. We name it. We create a description, test, and then we will need to write some code here. But don't feel overwhelmed. ChatGPT can help you, and in most cases, you don't even need functions. This would be if you want to build out AI agents. But today we will focus on building out AI chatbots. Then here, I've been here already a couple of times. The most important part is the knowledge. This is where we store the information or the knowledge that our AI agents needs to have. And we can do this by sharing just plain text, upload PDFs, docs, text files, and we can upload even websites. So Voiceflow will scrape the website for you, pull the information out of it, and store it in its knowledge base. Then you can include sitemaps. This is when you have multiple pages in a URL. You can put it all in there, and it will automatically scrape all the pages of the website. And then an integration to an external platform, like for example, Zendesk for customer support or ticketing system. So as you can see, there's already so much going on, so much things you can do with this platform. And yeah, I think this is most of the things that you need to know. Here are the transcripts. There's no transcripts yet because we haven't published it. Here you can have analytics once you deploy your chatbot, which is really, really great if you work with companies. And here's the place where you can integrate your chatbot. And this is a very, very simple process where you just copy and paste this code here. And then you just include it as a code snippet on your website. So let's say you use Webflow, then you just use the code block and just paste it in there, and it will pop up on your website. So you really don't need to know how to code. You just copy and paste this, put it in the right place, and then you're ready to go. And then you also have API keys where you can just bring this chatbot to another application essentially. So really, really powerful things you can do here. Here are a few settings which you can adjust, but most of all, I think this is enough for the beginning. But with this said, I would say let's actually build out our first chatbot, and this will be a lead generation chatbot. So before we get started, it makes sense, as I've mentioned before, to script out our idea in a flowchart. And I've already prepared this here in Figma. And our goal today is to build out a lead gen chatbot. And let's talk about the features it should have. And first of all, what it should do is it should give service recommendations. So the service we provide as agencies or freelancers, the chatbot should be able to spit out what services we provide, where the user can essentially choose which one they want to learn more about. Then it should answer questions based on company data. So we feed in the company data into the chatbot, or better said, into the knowledge base, which we have checked out already just before. And so that you know, this knowledge base is actually an integrated vector database. So if you don't know what a vector database is, you haven't listened well in the last video, or you didn't watch it. So I recommend you to really quickly check it out, because this is just fundamental understanding. But if you don't know what it is actually not that important. It is just nice to have background information. Then we want to gather their contact information, and we want to send this contact information into a Google Sheets, or better said, actually a CRM. But for the people who don't have a CRM, we will store it in a Google Sheets so that everybody can follow along. So yeah, this is the chatbot we will develop together. And the way the conversation will flow, this is a very, very abstract representation of it. But we have here the start button, and we want to greet the user and let the user decide if they want to choose a specific service or if they want to ask a question. And they can choose this with the button function. We will build this out in Voiceflow. This will make more sense. But depending if they want to ask a question, we will send them to the next block, which will let the user ask a question. And the AI will answer based on the knowledge base. And then once it has answered, we'll let the user decide if they want to ask another question. If yes, you can see I pulled this here. So this is like a loop. This happens all over again once the user decides to either end the conversation, or if they want to choose a product. And when they want to choose a product, they will be led back up here where they can choose a product essentially, or better said, a service. Pardon me, this is actually wrong here. In our case, it will be a service. Good. This I didn't want to do. Then we let the user actually choose which service they're interested in. So we have like branches in there. And once they have decided, we collect their email and name, and then we send this data via Make to a Google Sheets. Okay. So this is a very abstract representation of how the chatbot will look like, but this is actually how it will look like. So I've already pre-built this, and here I want to say, take a deep breath. Don't feel overwhelmed because it looks very complex with all these different paths here, but we will build it out together. So it will be very, very logic, and it will make much more sense. But I just wanted to show you this as a demo so that we can see how this chatbot will essentially behave. So let's test this chatbot actually. Let's run a test. Hi, welcome to Web3D Systems. And in what are you interested in? Am I interested in chatbot, in automation, or do I have a question? So as you can see, these are buttons which I can choose. And let's say I want to ask a question. I have a question. And what you can see is if we go down here, I have a question. Once the user presses this, we will go to this block here. And this block asks, how can I help you? And as you can see, it has worked. And then we want to capture the user's reply. So I want to know, tell me more about your pricing structure. And this question will be sent to an AI, where the question is the question which we have stored in the variable. And then essentially we have asked our knowledge base. So I've fed a knowledge base which we will do together. And I've just included some text there. So the text that it's spitted out is we have a bi-weekly pricing structure where customers get access to dedicated developers and a project manager as long as they are subscribed to the service. And then I have, again, three options down here. Ask another question, go back to start, or end the conversation. So here I could actually ask another question, but for the sake of this demo, let's just go back to the start. Great. So now we're actually back up here again. And let's say we're interested in a chatbot. So this has led me, as you can see the path here, it goes up here to these. Am I interested in AI agents, or am I interested in a regular chatbot? So as you can see, this is actually the carousel card where you can scroll. And if I include more and more in here, it will scroll infinitely essentially. So how many cards I have in there. But here I can again choose, I want an AI agent. And then, as you can see, this leads me to this card here. And it asks me, would you like me to send an inquiry? So I say, no, I'd like to explore other services. And what will happen there, it will send me back here again where we have this loop. And I can also end the conversation, but no, I want to actually get more information. So what I do now is I gather the information of the user. So what is your full name? So my name is Tim Scheuer. And now it asks me, what is your email? Provide me your email, Tim, Web3D Systems. And as you can see, I didn't got the ad right. Pardon. Was it here? Right. Great. Now I can send this. And what happens here is very interesting. It sends this data via an API call to make.com. So you know the fundamentals of API, so you should be aware. And here is the scenario, essentially, where I get the information from Voiceflow and then I store it in a new row in a Google Sheets. And if we go into the Google Sheets, we can see here is the data that I provided. Tim Scheuer, Tim at Web3D Systems. I've already tested it before. So here you can see how this essentially works. But now it's time that we actually build this from scratch. But it's great that we have a reference here so that we can understand it in more detail, essentially. So how this works is we start out with a text card and we say, hi there, smiley, welcome to Web3D Systems. And what we want to do is we want to give them options. And we do this by adding a card. And let's say we have this for chatbot. chatbot. And if I go here, I want to include a button, because with a button, the user can make an action. So let's say I want this is the button. Great. And now we can even include another card. So let me do this by going here, another card. Let's drop something new in here. Actually, I will just drop any visual here. This is actually about RAG, but let's say just automation button. I want this. Great. And the last button we want to include. So these are cards where you can include images to buttons essentially, or we could just go with a very simple choice with just a button. And here I say, I want to ask a question. Okay. So as you can see here, these are connectors we can use to connect to new cards. So if we want to do this, let's just do it directly here. And what we want to do is now we have first explored the card, but now we want to use the carousel where we can scroll different options. And let's start with the first card, which will be AI agents. So they can essentially choose between AI agents or just regular chatbots. So I could include here another card, regular chatbot. And if you want, you can include nice images here. Let me do this really quickly. Can browse here, include another image from a vector database, I guess. But it is really just for showcasing exactly what we want to do. And again, what we want to do is include a button. I just call it, I want this. Great. Include a button down here. I want this. Great. Lovely. So now we have this for the chatbot part if the client is interested. And then if I select this, I can actually do Command C and Command V to actually copy paste this. And to keep this tutorial simple, I will just keep the same images, but I will exchange the word with, I want to use automation with Zapier, or I want to use the automation using make.com. And if you want, you can even add a description here where you say, this is an automation platform, essentially. Great. So as you can see here, this is a more detailed card, essentially. So I would say let's just test this flow really quickly. So what happens is, pardon me, as you can see, already a lesson learned, path not connected. What does this mean? I need to connect this here. So let me escape, connect this here. And as you can see, these are connected. Great. Let's test it. Run test. What happens? Hi there. Welcome to Web3D Systems. Choose between a chatbot, an automation, or I want to ask a question. So let's be funky and I want to ask a question. And damn, nothing happened because there is no path connected. So let's try it all over again. But now let's use a path which is already built. Let's go with the chatbot one. I want this. What happens is it spits out me this carousel. As you can see, cards are aligned, stacked on top of each other, and carousel are next to each other. Okay, great. So let's keep going. Let's keep building this out. So let's say we have our user who is interested in this. So what we want to do is we want to ask the person if they want to, do you want me to send an inquiry to my team? So essentially I can connect all of these to this card here. Great. Lovely. And then, of course, I need to give them an option, yes, no, or other ones. So let's choose a button for this. Let's say yes. Let's say I want to explore other services, and no, I want to end the conversation. Great. Great. So we have these options now, which we can pull into another area. But let's go through this. So yes means we would proceed with another question. So what would we ask? We would ask, what is your name, essentially, right? And this again, we would store in a variable. So this is the first time where you come across variables. So here we want to name this variable differently than last utterance, because this doesn't make any sense or is a bit complex. So just let's call it just name, create variable. And this answer will be stored in the variable name. Great. But now we have, I want to explore other services. So to bring the user back, I just pull this connection here back to the start, where it essentially says, hi there, welcome to Web3D Systems. And it will have this loop essentially as long as the user finds something interesting. Okay, so this is connected. And no, I want to end the conversation is, let's put it down here. And what we want to do is under logic, we can put here, end. So the assistant is done, but maybe we would still like to greet or say goodbye to the user. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed our chat. Great. Okay, great. As you can see, this is already looking pretty decent. We're getting into a good direction. But before we actually build out the API call, we first need to, let's just copy and paste this. And the question is, what is your email? And what we want to capture here is we listen, capture. We create a new variable, which is called email. Great. And then we, of course, connect this here. And in the next step, we would actually call an API. So the way this would work is by having def and call the API. But before we set this up, I want to first finish this part down here. So we haven't actually started. I want to ask a question. So let's say the user has a question. So what we want to do is we pull this down here and we say, what do you want to know? Then, of course, again, as you can think, we will actually store this in question down here. Question, create variable. And then we want to answer this based on our knowledge base. So we put this up here and we want the AI to respond to it. AI responds. And here we have the data source. Either it is the AI model, this could be GPT-4, but now we want to use the knowledge base. So the question is actually, if we use this curly braces here, this pulls up all our variables and we have stored the question in the variable question. So we just include this here. And in the instructions, we tell the AI bot to respond to the question based on your knowledge base. Great. But now there's nothing in our knowledge base yet. So let's head over to the content section and into the knowledge. And here I've already created a very, very small document like this. And I've downloaded this as a PDF and we will together now upload this. Upload file. And I have it here. Voiceflow instruction PDF, import. And as you can see, this is now a new knowledge source. Lovely. So now let's go back to the designer. And here in the designer, we have the question answered by the AI. And yeah, let's see if this actually worked. Put this here. I want to ask another question. What do you want to know? Tell me about your services. Web3 Systems offers AI chatbot development, AI agent development, and AI automation development services. These services are available through a bi-weekly pricing structure where customers have access to dedicated developers and a project manager as long as they are subscribed to the service. So this has worked lovely. And let's escape here. And if the knowledge base didn't found the problem, we need to have a way how we can actually handle this error. And for this, we want to have another text card and tell them, I'm sorry, I'm unable to respond to this question. And then we want to give it multiple options, okay? Not found, up here. So we do options again with buttons. So one option is I want to ask another question. Great. The next button I want to include is I want to talk to a real team member. Add button. And I want to end the conversation. Great. So now again, we have included some logic in here. And let's escape this. I want to end the conversation. It's very simple. Okay, let's go up here. And let me actually delete this here. Lovely. Then I want a real team member to contact me essentially. And this is a way how we can actually just use this path here where we store the information in here. What is happening here? That's kind of weird. Okay, I will fix this bug later. But I want to ask a team member. Then I just go up here. What is your name? Great. And then last option, I want to ask another question. Then I just go up here. What do you want to know? I've had a small spelling mistake here. Ask. Great. Okay. So this is actually looking pretty decent. Let me check what else I've included down here. Question not found. Okay. Okay. So now that we have understood what I've done previously, when the question has been responded well, what we want to do is we want to talk to it again and give it actually options, better said, actually directly buttons, how it wants to proceed. Let's delete this one. Let's say I want to ask another question. I want to go back to the start. The last button is I want to end the conversation. Lovely. Good. Let's say end the conversation is clear up here. I want to ask another question. Is 1 second. up here. And I want to go back to the start, would be going up here. Okay, I think this has worked. Let me check. Yeah, it seems like. Okay. I would say let's test this really quickly. One test. I want to ask a question. Now we're down here. What do you want to know? Tell me about your pricing structure. This should know about it. Great. Oh, the path was not connected. That's not too good. So let me escape. And let's connect this path. Now it should work. I want to ask a question. What is your pricing structure? Great. Now I have the options here, and let's say I want to go back to the start, or I want to ask another question. And now let's make a question which he doesn't know. What is 1 plus 3 plus 4? Oh, damn, okay. What happened in World War One? Sorry, I didn't get that. Please try again. That's actually weird. Or I want to ask another question. When was Web3D Systems founded? I'm sorry, I'm unable to respond to this question. I want to ask another question. And here I have the option. I want to talk to a real team member. Let's check this out. What will happen is, what is your name? Tim. And then this session is ended because this isn't connected yet. So now that we have built out this answering machine essentially to asking company related questions, now it's time to send this data, meaning name and email, to our Google spreadsheet. So let me connect this. Why isn't this working right now? I need to rebuild this really quickly. Let's do it like this. Text. What is your email? Let's try to connect it now. Great, now it has worked. Small bug here, so not too good from Voiceflow. But no, all in all, it is a very robust platform. Capture. What we want to do is we want to store this in the variable. I think email we already have, so we would need to do email 1 in this case. Okay. And now we want to connect this to the API call. So the way this works is we want to send this data to make.com and then from make.com to a Google Sheets. So how this would work essentially is we want to make a post request because we want to post data in make.com. And the way we do this is by doing it with a webhook. So if we go back here in make.com, I will create actually the exact same scenario. I will create a webhook, custom webhook. Then I want to add a new webhook and I call it Voiceflow test and I save this, okay? So what we first need to do is we want to test this webhook essentially. So we want to copy this address to the clipboard and so that the webhook understands what kind of data comes from Voiceflow, because it never has seen what has come from there. So it first needs to understand what kind of structure it has. So let's go back to Voiceflow and configure this web API call. So I've just copied this link here. So by just copy address to clipboard. And now we're back here. And what we want to do is we want to include something in the body. So we want to send data from Voiceflow to make.com essentially. And what we want to tell them is the name, and here's the value or the variable. So we have stored this data for a reason. We have stored it to send it later on. So for this, let's use curly braces. And as you can see here, I can already find the name. I have the variable name. Great. So I want to include another data set, and the data set is email. Let me include this as a big email. Again, curly braces. And as you can see, we have used email 1 because we have already created email. Would need to delete this variable. Lovely. Okay. So now let's just test it out really quickly. Run test. Let's make it as fast as possible. Chatbot. Job. Tim. And web. Oh, damn. What is your name? I was too early. Tim, Web 3D Systems. And what will happen? It will send the data, and I think it has worked. Successfully determined. Great. So now we can actually build out our scenario. So we want to build out a Google Sheet. So add a row to a Google Sheet. But first, let me go into my Drive really quickly. Create a Google Sheets here. Let's call it Voiceflow test. Up here we have the name, and here we have the email. Okay. Lovely. Okay. So now I will be able to find this Voiceflow test file here, Voiceflow test. And as you can see, it should have the first row name and the second row should be email. It is loading quite some time, which is fine. Sheet name, sheet 1, obviously. So let's see if it works. And perfectly fine. It has worked great. So now again, make.com still don't know what kind of data comes through. So we again need to go through this process one more time. And we will do this by just running through the chat again. Run test, run test. Let's rush through this. Yes. Yes. Tim. Web 3D Systems. Yes. Great. Okay. So we have got a request. Oh, damn. I hope we got the request. Okay, let me save this really quickly. Let me check if it has understood the data. Yes. So we have the name value and we have the email. And now I have turned this, oh, pardon me. Never forget to save your scenarios. I always forget it. And now we have it turned on. So now we can actually test this chatbot and see what happens. So again, let's make another run. But as you can see, we're really fast with it. Great. Welcome to want this. I want this. Yes. Tim at Web 3D Systems. And let's see what happens. So let's go into Voiceflow leads. And it seems like it didn't work. Oh, wait. Did I use the right, or pardon me, I don't want to. diagram. Okay. Not sure what happened here exactly, but I would say let's just go through it one more time. So let's use the test assistant and escape, run through it one more time. Pardon me for taking so long. But as you can see, it's always about iteration and about trying out and finding out where the problem is. Yes. What is your name? Tim. Let me just include some placeholder text here. Okay. And let's see if it has worked. Perfect. It has sent the data. And if you want to see how this has worked out, you can go into your make scenario under history. You can find how this has worked out by clicking here on details. Okay. Here you have the output, and here you can see what has been inputted essentially. So yeah, great. And now finally, the last step would be essentially to publish this. Let's call it version 1, publish. And now we could embed this widget on our website, or we could just share it with our clients if we build it out for our clients via a web URL, which is really great. So start a conversation. Hi there, welcome to Web3D Systems. As you can see now, it looks much more nice. I want this. And as you can see, it looks very nice in the browser. So this is actually more or less all you need to know to start out building chatbots in Voiceflow. Of course, there are a few other functionalities like calling functions, adding JavaScript to it. But later on, you will have here more analytical data, which you can measure and improve your chatbot based on this. And here, as mentioned before, you would include this into your website just by copy and pasting this code into a code snippet, essentially. And with this said, actually, this is more or less all you need to know. I will include the blueprint of this chatbot in the down in the area where there you can find it essentially. And I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you have questions, feel free to just ask them in the school community. And thanks for watching. Let's say you have closed your first consulting or development deal, and now it's time to actually help your client implement a solution. And usually this all starts with consulting. You try to advise your client on the best solution they should implement into their business. And for this, I found 3 really, really helpful frameworks, which also really helped me to deliver the best results to my clients. And it just gave me a structured approach to this uncertain part, which is identifying what product you should implement for the client, because there are infinite possibilities. And the question is, which one is the best? And overall, you first start with the AI readiness assessment, where you check how is their data infrastructure, how is their what is their business value proposition, and based on this, that you don't go too far from it, so that the core of the business stays the same, but you try to enhance it with AI. Then what kind of infrastructure they have. With this, I mean mainly the tech infrastructure, the servers, the tech stack, their organizational readiness, meaning how well do they adopt to new challenges and how well do they adopt to new trends and technologies, because culture is really the biggest bottleneck or the biggest fueler of technology. Then ethics and governance. So based on these indicators, you can essentially evaluate the AI readiness index. And there are a lot of resources online which you can check out. I can highly advise you to read yourself into this AI readiness index or the AI readiness framework, so that you can essentially help your clients identify where they're standing in their business and where the potential for AI can be leveraged the best. And then there's the time to think about a product, and there the design thinking framework is a really, really good way to identify a good business case. And you first really want to get yourself into the shoes of your client. So you want to be empathetic with them And yeah, you just ask yourself, how can I best approach this problem? And you first want to define the objectives. So define the project, problem, the objectives, the desired outcome. And from there, you ask yourself, how do I create a solution? And then you prototype it and you test it. And you can go through this framework multiple times. And the same applies to the agile development framework. So if we go in here, you start out with planning, defining the objectives, you design. In your case, this would be most likely with a flow chart like this, or a very basic prototype, maybe a GPT or a prototype in Voiceflow. Then you really develop the project, and then you roll it out and test it with a few people, a few core group, which is competent to test it out. And then you essentially deploy it and review how it performs. And after 1 month, you reiterate, and you can do this multiple times. So this is agile development, where you have multiple sprints and you go through this framework multiple times. So these are really great frameworks, which I can highly advise you to read yourself into, to be able to guide your clients the best to adopting AI and automation into their business. If you're struggling to land your first few clients, I can highly advise you to use this technique here. So essentially what you do is you work with an agency who already has traffic, who already has leads, and who can convert them essentially. So you don't need to learn how to sell. You don't need to learn how to market services, because this is actually a really, really hard skill to learn. And it takes a lot of time to build a company. So what you can actually do is you can partner, or better said, you're a freelancer at an agency, because usually agencies work with freelancers. And where do you find these people? And the great thing is there are partner programs from Make, from Zapier, from Bubble, and we will check it out, how you can essentially find the decision makers to pitch your service. And in most cases, they're actually looking for developers, and this is the way that really has worked well for me. So here in the Make partners directory, you can find a lot of different companies. These are gold partners, but the best way is actually that you filter through location to increase the chance that you get essentially a job. Let's say you're from Canada, then you have a great lead list of automation agencies which you can contact. And if we go in here, let's just check this one out, and let's check out their website. And the way I approach this is usually by going to their website, checking out who's the decision maker. Can I find one? Okay, meet Michael. I hope he has a LinkedIn profile where I can check. How was it written? Michael. Okay. Michael from the company called RK Tech. Maybe we find a result. Sadly not. Let's check out another company for the sake of showing you how to generate leads. This sounds pretty good because he already has his name in there. And here you can even see careers. So they have open positions, make.com, low code and automation expert. It is remote, part-time, most likely it will be even remote for sure, but even a freelance position where you have more flexibility. Chris Kundari. Let's check out his name. Chris Kundari. He's from Toronto. This one is the right guy. And the way I would approach is follow him, connect with him, and then send him a message that you're actually an AI automation engineer. You specialize in make.com, and you would love to join his agency if he has any projects with overhead, because usually these agencies which are already established, they're growing because the industry is just booming at the moment. So it's a really great way to find a job essentially. Then the same with Zapier. You can do the exact same process. There are a lot of agencies out there, and I would usually target the gold and silver um, members or agency partners. Then there's also for Bubble. If you're a no-code app developer, you can go with Bubble, or you could apply for jobs directly in the Bubble forum, which is also a wonderful way how you can get your first client. So yes, this is the way which really worked well for me for the past 2 months now. But of course, remember, at the end, you're not really building a business. You're just selling your time. You're just a freelancer at this time. But it's a great stepping stone to get your first few case studies, to learn, to get your hands dirty, and to start building projects essentially. Because if you're in this rat race of just experimenting and trying to learn, you can get quite stuck in there. I've been there for quite some time. So this really accelerated my whole business journey. So now I'm here in Upwork, and this is definitely also a great way to acquire your first few clients, even though the gigs here are in most cases not that high paying, which is fine if you just want to gain experience and especially want to create some case studies. So I found my first 3 to 4 clients actually here on Upwork, and I brought them off the platform to negotiate my own conditions. So this really worked well for me. So I will guide you how you can do the same. So first of all, you need to set up a profile, and I would just mention that you're an AI automation engineer, and maybe mention a couple of tools which you specialize in. In the header, you just talk about what your strengths are, then explain what kind of tool suite you're working with, what kind of solutions you can build out, maybe something about yourself. I've mentioned that I run a YouTube channel where I help other people implement AI solutions to really boost my authority. So anything that helps should be put into here. And here's the first gig I made actually was in September, just a short consulting project about Voiceflow. And here are a couple of portfolio projects which I've included here. And if you can also include quite some good branding, this is my advice for you. And then here you can go to Upwork and search for projects. And here are projects that match your profile. And as you can see, there are a lot of ones out there, and you can filter for most recent or best matches. And the way I would approach this is maybe look for a project that you're interested in or you're skilled for. For me, it would be, for example, make.com. And these are quite low paying. So this one could be interesting. Groundbreaking software. And the way I would do it, the way I would approach this client is I try to gather every information I can get out of there. And I would already pre-build these automations in make.com, for example. So let me log in here really quickly and get into the right environment. Great. Then let's check what the client actually wants. Releasing groundbreaking software product. Okay, so they most likely want to have multiple automations. Okay, this is actually marketing. I haven't really looked, but you could offer something like that. Meta, or is it Facebook ads? Yeah, here. So as soon as a new lead comes in, what you want to do is save this to your CRM, could be HubSpot. Let me custom objects, add a contact to a list. Then you want to maybe include them into an email automation, which could be, for example, on Beehive. Create a subscriber, and then in Beehive you have an email automation. And this is a potential automation. I would just screenshot and send this to this person to apply for this job, essentially. This is the way I would approach clients. So I would give out free value already. So I would show them what I'm capable of in some way. And obviously, this takes much more time than doing automated outreach. But in my experience, this has been much worth it, because they see you're engaged, they see you're committed, and they will be more likely to respond to you, and then also in that sense work with you. So after you have the first point of contact, I highly advise you to bring them on a call. Try to close them on the call, because there you can also negotiate the price a bit better and bring them off Upwork essentially, and also send, for example, a Stripe invoice.